Alright, good morning everyone. Today we're going to create our first DLL. So what do you need? You need Visual Studio 2019. You do want to install the Visual C++ Desktop Tools package. So we're going to take a look at what I mean. So in your start menu, you probably have some kind of Visual Studio installer. So if you don't have Visual Studio installed, you probably won't have it. But go ahead and install Visual Studio 2019. And after you install it, or if you haven't, let's take a look at the VS installer. So this program allows you to modify the options that you have for your Visual Studio. The Visual Studio that I will be using is Microsoft Visual Studio 2019. You can do 17 or 22, doesn't really matter. But in 2019, I do have a particular package installed. So I'm going to show you after I click the modify button that it is this one, the desktop development with C++. Make sure it's checked, otherwise you won't be able to create any C++ project. Okay, having said that, I do have it installed, so let's get started. So Visual Studio 2019. Alright, so we're going to start Visual Studio 2019. First thing that we want to do is to create a project. So go to File, New, Project. Since I just did it earlier on, so it's in the right place. So go ahead and choose C++ if you have many options you have here. And you're creating for Windows, definitely. And so there are many types of projects. So go ahead and choose library. Okay, so those are your choices. So what we want is dynamic link library. Okay, so what is the name? Now I created on my desktop. You can create anywhere anywhere you want. I'm gonna call it my first DLL. Okay. Place solution project in the same directory. Okay, so create. So what it does is that it creates a folder on my desktop with this kind of code. So I'm going to go back to my desktop real quick. So my first DLL is right there. And so you are actually pretty good to go. Now, first thing first, I'm using VDF 16.1. So I will be creating NC version of everything. So the first thing that I would do, if you're using DataFlex before 20.0, you would do this step. So go ahead and right click. Now I'm going to do it again. Right click on the project itself, not the solution, the project itself, and choose properties. Now first thing that you want to make sure that is for both debug build and release build. If you don't know what I'm talking about, don't worry. Making sure that you choose all configuration. So go to under configuration properties, go to advanced, and then by default it sets to use Unicode character sets. Go ahead and pick from the drop list and choose multiply character set, MBCS. Okay, so click OK. So you're fine. So we're gonna create a function. All it does is that it just prompts a message box. So let's do that. So the first thing that you do is do extern C. So it changes the calling, changing the name mingling. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, then don't worry about it. Just type it in for the time being. And then we're going to return a Boolean. So in C++, is bool means Boolean. And then you can type in Win API. So that's the calling convention. This word is very important. If you don't have this word, DataFlex won't be able to call it. If you don't do this word, it's going to be calling C++, the C calling convention. Okay, so we're going to create a simple message box call, which is going to call MB. And at the beginning, we will take a question. Let's do just a question. Let's just call it question. And then it returns a Boolean. So let's just call it return true first. Okay, so compiler is happy. There's no red lines. So let's actually call message box. Okay, this is the Windows API call. So if you don't know how to the definition of it, so I'm gonna go to Google for you guys real quick. So on off screen. So in Google, just type in whatever API call that you want to call. Type message box and then MSDN. Okay, so this is the search term. I always add MSDN at the end. It will know to go to Microsoft documentation. So click on this. So this is message box. We've seen that in DataFlex packages many times. So we're gonna keep that in the background. We're gonna go back to here. So when I start typing parenthesis, it asks for WindowsHandle. I don't have one. I'm just gonna pass no, and the text. So I'm just gonna say question, and then I don't have a caption, so I'm just gonna pass no. And then what do I want the message box to look like? So let's take a look at what you type can be. So a lot of things. So I want to pick this one, MBS no. So the good thing about calling API calls in C++ is that you don't have to define anything. It's just there. Okay. So it has a return value. So I'm going to say result equals this. So it will return true if the result is yes. Otherwise, or return false. So I'm going to say result equals. So what is yes? I think it's ID yes or ID yes without underscore. So if it is a yes, then it's true. If it's not, then it's false. So this will create this is your first DLL function. So does that mean that it's gonna you can call it now? Not really. The last step that you want to do is to do pragma. So I think it's comment. Let's see. Actually, I kind of forgot. So go ahead and go to frankcheng.com. I have to do a plug on here. So on this line, I always forget exactly this line. So I'm going to copy this line. And go back to my program. Alright, so the line looks like this. Comment linker, blah, blah, blah. Well, I'm just going to use that line. So what this line does is to tell the linker. When you compile a program in C++, there's a compiler and there's a linker. Compiler just basically generating object files per each source code file that you have. And the linker is to combine all the object files into a final executable, resolving references. So DataFlex does a one-pass kind of thing. So if you don't know the difference between a linker and a compiler, don't worry. It's not that important in this particular context. So what I want is that I'm going to change it to here. So what just happened? Okay, so when you compile this function, the name MB is going to turn into this. So the compiler is going to turn this name into this convention. So it will add an underscore in front of it, and then whatever name that you have, your function name, and then we'll add an at the end. And then there's a number. So the number is basically the number of bytes your parameter takes. So let's just say that you have one parameter. For each parameter, just multiply by 4. So at this point it's 4. So let's just say that I have two parameters. Let's just say that I take an integer I. Then your parameter is going to be 8 because each parameter is 4 bytes. So 2 parameters is 8 bytes. So what if you don't have any parameters? Let's just say that you take out everything. Then it will be at 0. Okay? So this is the name that is going to be generated. But for the sake of sanity, we do not want to use this name right? We do not want to use this name. So we're going to saying that when we export, we're going to rename this guy back to this guy. So the outside world is going to see MB instead of underscore MB at 4, because this is what's going to generate. So I'm going to retype back this part. Okay, so that no compiler error. So this is done. So your first function, it will take a string and then it will just display a message box. So go ahead, and this one is like running with or without the debugger, that kind of stuff. Let's just go ahead and choose release. Whenever you are about to deploy it, go ahead and choose release. Whenever you want to debug something, choose debug build. Okay. So I'm gonna build the solution. As you can see, since I'm using release build, it will actually tell you in the output saying that this is where the DLL is at. Okay. So for me to find it is pretty easy. It's because I put it on desktop and then release. So that's your DLL. So I'm gonna put it on your desktop. This is just for demonstration. So I'm gonna create a program. I'm just going to call it test.src. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and edit it. So I'm just use Windows external function. I'm gonna call it MB anyway, so just not to confuse anyone. So this is the name in DataFlex. You can call it MBVDF or whatever name that you want, doesn't matter. Now this is what I'm typing is the name within the DLL. It has to match since I called it MB, so it's gonna be MB. So it's called my first DLL.dll. It takes a string. Let's just call it as question. Returns a boolean. Okay, so to call it, I'm going to do a show line. I'm going to call this guy, have you eaten yet? And I'm going to stop it so that you can see the outputs. So, and then I'm going to save and compile, and then it will ask you yes or no. So if I click yes, it will show 1. Hopefully it's 1. Now I'm going to be done and then run it again. As you can see, if I click no, it will show 0. Okay, fair enough. So this is basically an introduction to calling a DLL or creating a DLL and call it in DataFlex. We're gonna create a little bit more complex example later on, but this is the introduction. So if you have any questions, feel free to comment or ask in the comment section below, and I will see you guys next time.